Hi, I'm Gaz, and I run an independent game studio called Fayju, which is based in Swindon. And our office is in that building there, which is the Wyvern Theatre in Swindon. And what we've been working on for the past, well, working on various things, but what we've been working on in our little office is making a game called Amazing Frog, mainly. So Fayju is me, Gaz Bushell, and Hal, who's not here. He's busy making models for a dungeon at the moment, I think. But we have been making Amazing Frog for maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe, now. We released it on Ouya last March, and it did pretty well. And what I'll do is I'll just show you, so you know what it is. I'll show you the Greenlight video that we just put up. We just recently submitted to Greenlight, and we got Greenlight in 7 days, and we were quite pleased with that. But I'll show you the video so you can sort of understand a bit more of what I'm talking about. If it's got sound. Basically, it's about a ragdoll frog, the game, and we've been growing it for about a year on Ouya since we did the first release, and we were not ready when we released it, and we're still really not ready. We're 2 people trying to make a game which is way too stupidly overambitious for 2 people to make. You know, we like playing games like GTA, we like running around sandbox environments and having the freedom to do whatever we want, except we want to make a game like that as well. We didn't really want to make a small, simple game. So what I'm going to do is I'll explain the kind of process that got us to this point of making this game. So our background, I've been working with Harry for like 6 or 7 years. We started out making games in our spare time. I've always been a games developer. I used to make Flash games and games for advertising purposes, very soul-destroying at the time. Making a game for, you know, a camera or gambling games and various things like that. And that's kind of where my background was as a career. Alongside that, I've always been a digital artist. So I used to make, I still do, make digital installations where, you know, you have sort of interactive lights and things. And people go, ooh. But the main passion of what I'm doing is making games. And so Harry and I started making a game called Fayju Ball about in 2009, when we realized that we could actually become independent games developers. I didn't actually have to work for somebody to be able to make a career out of it. I mean, it was a bit overambitious again, because we kind of figured that we could build a game and then make a company out of it, but it didn't really work like that. And it was a physics-based game where you hold the phone and then you tip the ball, tip it upside down and shake it, and then try and get it in the holes. And it did all right in terms of charting, but it didn't really make too much money. And then we got into an opportunity where we ended up, well, I was offered the opportunity to start a company with somebody else called Geek Beach. And I said, that's great, but I need Harry, so we've got to work together, because we formed this sort of development team that we're both very comfortable with. Harry makes fantastic models, and I've always been a programmer. And we've got a good working relationship, I guess. We're both interested in the same stupid things. And so we spent a year at Geek Beach building basically iPhone puzzle games and trying to establish, the main purpose of us there was to try and establish what's the model to try and make money out of this. We were trying to make money for a company, ultimately. And we started out with puzzle games like Monsters and various other tests and games like that. We built, I think, 6 or 7 games in that one year for iPhone. And it accumulated with Dune Rider, really, which was like a freemium game where you earn and play currency throughout the game. And I think that both of us kind of like, it was doing all right and it was fairly successful, but it wasn't really what we wanted to do. And so in 2011, I managed to set Fayju up so it was full-time, and me and Harry started doing that full-time. 2011? 2011. And we came up with this plan. And the plan was, we were mobile developers at the time. The only place where we could be independent games developers and release our games that we felt was on Apple or iOS. And so we came up with 3 game ideas. Well, yeah, we came up with these three game ideas: The Amazing Frog, Cascade, and Goldilocks and the 3,000 Bears. And our plan was always to build all 3 of them at the same time, because we figured that we'd have more chance of success if we built 3 games at the same time. And we're still doing that. So Amazing Frog is the one with the frog which falls over as a ragdoll. Goldilocks is one with ragdoll bears that you shoot and they fly against the walls, and then picks Goldilocks up and throws her around, and it's all very grotesque. And there's this was the one we first started working on, actually. And Cascade is a game that I had been meaning to make with a friend of mine who's a biochemist, and the whole gameplay is based on the pathology of Alzheimer's and his research. So we started off with Goldilocks, and what actually came about was that whilst we originally conceived that we were going to build these as mobile games because it was like a survival tactic, that's how we're going to be able to survive on our own, as in we're not being employed by someone, we're just out there on our own trying to make a living out of doing this. We figured that they were going to be mobiles. And then suddenly in 2012, in August, we got to a point, and Julie Ehrman announced the whole Ouya initiative. And it was like, wow, it was kind of it felt like it was speaking directly to us. And so we backed it and tried to get in touch with them. Nothing happened. And we started building Goldilocks in January 2012. We put together the first version of Goldilocks, which was going to be our first Ouya game. But whilst this was going on, we'd already started working on The Amazing Frog, which was, at that point, we'd built most of the car park in Swindon, and we were throwing the frog off the top of the building like a beanbag, just like flicking it across the screen, and it was flying off. And after we'd finished the first prototype for Goldilocks with these ragdoll bears that you could shoot and they'd fall over and stuff, we suddenly thought, well, so what if we, the ragdoll came from the Amazing Frog ragdoll, what if we actually put that walking back into the Amazing Frog? So when we throw him off a building, he then just gets up and kind of walks off. We thought that'd be funny. And so we tried it out. And then we got so obsessed with the fact that he was running around and falling over the pavements, the curves, crashing into anything explosive, that it became more fun than the original game. And the kind of game that we felt had to be played with a controller. So that's what made us focus then fully on Ouya. And then we released the first kind of sketchy version of Amazing Frog in March on the development version of Ouya, and sort of showcased it at GDC, which we weren't really sure what to expect. We had this game that we just thought was hilarious, but we weren't expecting other people to get that kind of stupidity, because we just figured that everyone would think, oh, your game's broken, your game is low quality, it doesn't look, but it turned out that wasn't the case. So we carried on with the development of Cascade while we were going through all this, and again, like 2 games in a row. And the point that we've got to at the moment is that we've got this flight system that we've got for Cascade, and that is going to be part of the Amazing Frog world. And the whole world of Amazing Frog has become the central core to all of our 3 games that we're building. So all the functionality that we put into the Amazing Frog, whether he can walk along and pick up a gun and get shot and fall over, or whether he can get into a car and drive it around, or now get into a biplane or fly in a spaceship. These are all our own infrastructure, which we've been building up our own little weird library of stuff that we can do, which the frog can do, but also which can be these games. And so these 3 game environments are expanding, but what's happening is they're all being pushed into each other, and they're all becoming the same game. Yeah. So it kind of steamrolled from that point. So we had these 3 games, and we have Amazing Frog, which we've started to show to people at GDC. And that was 2013. And then that almost becomes like a bug. We then started showing that game almost everywhere. So it's to get people to see it or to play it. And that we were doing sort of exclusively on an Ouya. And we didn't have any money. We'd pretty much run out from where we were at. And we went to Los Angeles. We didn't have any money, we went to Los Angeles. We went to Los Angeles to sort of get a face-to-face with Ouya. And this is after we'd had Amazing Frog in there for a while. We hadn't had any contact with them. I think I'd spoken briefly with Bob Mills, who's the games guy there, for once, I think. And so we figured that the only way this is going to work is if we got a face-to-face. We kind of believed in Ouya, and we thought they were going to grow. We knew they were in California, so there wasn't going to be much hope of them really caring too much about us based in Swindon. And there wasn't another Ouya in Swindon that we had as much confidence in. And so we went over there and we met them. And what happened was we went around and it was installed on all the machines. And then whenever there was a blank screen or one of these things, we just went around and put Amazing Frog on it. And when it went on there, it just stayed on there, and people just kept playing it and just enjoying this stupid game. So then we entered into an exclusive deal with Ouya, and we kind of stayed with them for around about, since November, I think. And we focused fully on development. But what kind of happened there is that we were building so closely for the platform, which is this, I don't know if you know what an Ouya is. It's like a small micro Android-based console which has got a Tegra 3 chip in it, and it's not exactly very powerful. And so some of the things that we were trying to do, like have crowds of frogs just throw and just become like World War Z kind of stuff flying around all over the place, wasn't really possible. So we'd already decided that Goldilocks and 3,000 Bears was probably never going to happen until they upgraded their architecture. But these were kind of the things that we wanted to put in Amazing Frog as well. So we knew in the back of our minds that we were going to have to move onto PC at some point just to take advantage of that extra power. But throughout that year that we were with Ouya, they were supporting us. And so we were doing everything we could to make it the best game was for Ouya. And we stayed pretty much at the top of the charts for most of the year. And it helped us grow the game and think it through. We've grown this universe around this frog, which is essentially us scaling Swindon out. We started with this idea of this ragdoll frog that farts, and he's like this superhero that lives in Swindon, the kind of superhero that we would expect to see walking the streets of Swindon, because we don't live in Gotham or anything like that. We look out the window and we see Swindon in front of us, and we think, well, what kind of superhero would we expect to see there? And we see Amazing Frog falling in front of a bus and farting, and that's kind of what we've got. And then we've built the story as we went along. So we lead ourselves with the technology of the game, and it's not like the story comes secondary to it. It's just that we have these visions of what it is we want to make, but sometimes we can't always get exactly there because the reality of trying to build this thing gets in the way of what we're trying to do. So we come across a hurdle, which might be like whether it was on Ouya, and it was the hurdle of we can't make it rain frogs today because we've only got a Tegra 3. But then even then, when we move on to PC, we can't do various things we want to do because there's only 2 of us, and we can't build like 4 kilometers of city out of the blue. Well, with time, maybe. So what's all that stuff? Oh, that's us going to all these places and getting press and the game getting picked up on YouTube and various things like that, which is all very encouraging. And I think that, you know, if that stuff hadn't happened, I don't think we'd have found it so easy to get through Greenlight. Things like, you know, PewDiePie playing the game is just, I mean, he's there playing a game, and that's fantastic. And him playing your game is like, you know, suddenly loads of attention is on your game. It's like the best thing you could possibly ask for. And you don't even ask him to do it. He just goes and does it. And the other thing is, like, the guys that play these games and make these videos of it, it's like, you know, me and Harry were talking about the other day, they're like the modern day puppet masters. Like, they take a game and it's like a puppet show. They take your game and they do stuff with it. And they make a sort of their own little dialogue with it and a little film. And actually, it's kind of funny. I like watching them, sort of gameplay videos. So I figured that I would just sort of show you a very sort of in development, if it runs, version of what's going on with where we're at. So just to get a clearer thing. So we have this, this is a hideout. So we figured that the game that we used to supply, you would get dumped into Swindon, and a lot of people would be like, press the button and jump and fall over, and, you know, immediate reaction is, what the fuck is going on here? And that's great. But because we wanted to build this bigger game, we've created this hideout so that we can have stuff that gets stored there. We still want to retain the sort of split-screen multiplayer aspect of it. But we want you to, instead of dumping people in Swindon, we wanted to start them off somewhere so they could come to it. So what we've got here is like a test version of the new Swindon that we're doing just to set up driving cars. So when we're building the game, what we do is we have a 3D environment. We have a bunch of these scenes that we set up. And so we set up a scene, and for this scene is basically for testing driving. So we've got the ragdoll system we've got, and I can just take that frog and place him in the scene. I can place him on any model I want and just move him around, provided it's in the right layers and things. And the objective is just literally to try out stuff like the new driving system, or getting him in the car and things, and then spinning around, or driving a bus. So we had this thing before where, because we hadn't built the entire world of Swindon, that we used to have this edge of the gameplay area where it was basically just not built. And that whole area where it just wasn't built, people would just challenge themselves to get out to it. So instead of having that there, we set up a giant wall, which actually becomes the next challenge in the game. Because without a trampoline, you're not going to get over that wall. But it is possible to jump on trampolines and bounce out of it. And then the other aspect of this test environment is for me to just set up things like new versions of frogs that are just want to just clamber all over you, trying out a different version of like the zombie aspect where they just like fall around on the floor and slide after you. And this probably won't even go in the game, but this is just us playing around with the technology that we've got, and just to see what happens. We may put this somewhere, like in the sewer that Harry's building at the moment, but it's just there are points where some things are just too unstable to put into the game, and there are points where it's just like, is there any sound on that? I don't know. There are points where it's just the right amount of unstable. I don't know. But that in 2 players is kind of fun. I think I'll probably just leave that up there. Is there any questions?
They're all happy just watching this.
I'll just leave it up there.
Anyone got any questions? Or? No, cool. Okay, so thanks guys there.
Yeah.
Cracking